All right, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Elevated Signals. My name is Austin Bell. I'm part of the customer success team here. And I've got a group of awesome panelists here to talk about how to scale your cannabis operation and some best practices for sustainable growth. So a lot of experience on this panel, and want to take an opportunity here to kind of go around the room and let our panelists introduce themselves. So yeah, if you want to just give us, 1 to 2 minutes kind of on your background in cannabis, maybe a little bit about who you are as a person. And yeah, I'll just pass the mic to top left here. Alex, why don't you kick us off with a little intro on you?
Of course. Hi, thank you for having me. So my name is Alexandre Gauthier. I'm the Director of Cultivation, VP of R&D, and Sales Analyst at Origin Nature. I've been in the cannabis industry since I would say my early teenage years, officially in Canada since 2017. I went through Aurora Cannabis, Final Health Solution, and Origin Nature. I did the whole GACP, GMP conversion to be able to send product internationally. We're lucky to be one of the rare cannabis company that's actually profitable, and we have a great team. And thanks to solid partners like Elevated Signal, well, we can say that we like to think that we're one of the success in the cannabis industry. So thank you for having me and letting me share my experience.
Of course. Quick, like non-cannabis question, just to kind of break the ice and add a little bit of fun to this webinar. So, question for you, Alex, is if you're going to pair your favorite flavor of ice cream with your favorite strain or cultivar, what are those two flavors? So, favorite ice cream and favorite strain that they'd pair with.
So I'm a big fan of hashish. So I will definitely go with a coffee milkshake and ice cap and have a good old hashish joint. If I have to go with one of my preference, it would probably be one of the Bildia region hashish. But yeah, hashish and coffee definitely my go-to.
I dig it. I dig it, man. Love the intro. Let's keep going around the circle. So, Sarah, give us a background a little bit on you and cannabis and maybe a little bit about you as a person as well.
Sure. So I'm a management consultant. I've been working exclusively in cannabis for the last going on 9 years, both in Canada and internationally. And a lot of my focus is on organizational strategy. It's really like lining up that people strategy and making sure that the business strategy and the people strategy is deeply incorporated in with each other. Personally, almost everybody knows I'm from Barbados. I'm Canadian born, but I'm from Barbados. I grew up in the Caribbean. It comes out when I'm mad. You hear the accent when I'm pissed off. That's how you know, right? And I just moved out to Vancouver Island. I'm taking the summer off, which for anybody who knows me knows that is an impossible thing. I've never taken any time off. So I'm taking the summer off and I'm diving and climbing mountains and riding horses and doing all the amazing things.
That's awesome. So I guess non-cannabis question for you, Sarah. How do you wind down at the end of a day after working in cannabis or something? Is there a good show on Netflix you're watching, or how does Sarah decompress at the end of the night? What's your shutdown routine after a long day of work?
I try to get outside, to be honest. Like I run, I hike, anything to do with nature. That's my Zen place. So I try to get outside. If I can't, then I go to the red wine.
Dig it. So opposite of Netflix most of the times, but
Yeah.
a night in will be accompanied by a glass of red wine. What wine pairs great with cannabis too, so I guess we can just roll right into that. What would you pair your glass of red wine with as far as a cannabis product goes?
Well, I think technically we're not supposed to say that we mix alcohol with cannabis. None of us do that, right? None of us do that. It's a big no-no. I'm a big CBD girl. CBD, CBN, CBG. So I find that with red wine specifically, like it makes just a nice kind of, it takes your relaxation to that extra level without kind of giving you couch lock.
Cool. I dig it. All right. Last but certainly not least, we got Mr. Tom here. Tom, why don't you give us a little intro on you and your work in cannabis and also just who you are as a person?
Yeah, thanks, Austin. I am Tom Smale. I'm founder of Growbox Consulting and right now COO for Clinics Plant Science. I have a long story with cannabis. I'll keep it simple. I'm a legacy guy through and through. I was probably running around cannabis before I even knew what it was as a kid. And went legal. And one of my favorite things to do is to try and bring like legacy guys and that culture into the new industry. So we spend a lot of time trying to help companies get from seed to sale and ultimately scale up. So I'm kind of excited to be a part of this webinar.
Heck yeah. Non-cannabis question for you, Tom. Crunchy or smooth peanut butter? And if you're making a PB&J, do you cut it diagonally or down the middle?
Oh,
We're getting into the hard stuff
yeah,
now.
yeah. Without a doubt, smooth, right? No, diagonal for sure.
Dig it. Awesome, guys. Well, yeah, let's jump into the nitty gritty because as much fun as it is to kind of learn about each other as people, we want to talk about cannabis here and bring some value to potential customers, partners, other stakeholders in the cannabis industry. So this webinar is focused on scaling cannabis operations, which is a very broad topic, could mean different things to different people, but I think to start the webinar, it could be good for us to kind of just define what we mean when we're talking about scaling ops. What is that from a very kind of, you know, high level overview? So, Sarah, I know you approach a lot of your projects um, before digging into the nitty gritty of the operation, like what are our cultivation metrics, or what is the environmental performance of our cultivation space, or how are we post processing this cannabis that we've grown? You do take a very high level approach to these projects first and foremost. So I'm going to kick this first question over to you. How would you define scaling cannabis operations, or what do we mean when we're talking about, successfully, sustainably growing cannabis ops?
Sure. So that's a big question. So one of the, I guess, when you're talking about scaling, it means different things to different people. If you are a board of directors, it means getting as much money and as much yield as fast as humanly possible without really thinking it through. Right. So I end up on the receiving end. I see Tom nodding his head. I end up on the receiving end of a whole bunch of conversations where it's the end of the quarter. Somebody has presented to a board. I get a call to say, oh my God, Sarah, we're not growing enough. We're not growing enough. We need to double the amount of plants in the room. We need to double the amount of people. And we need to do it right now so that by next quarter, when I go back to the board of directors, we're having a different conversation and they're happier with me. And I'm like, okay, so that's not a plan. That's not a plan. So to make the answer a little bit shorter, to sustainably grow, you have to have a business plan. If you don't have a business plan, you don't know what you're doing. You have to have actual achievable, executable metrics, and then you have to be able to grow it. So if you're growing your cultivation, it can't be done overnight. It has to be done strategically. It has to be done sustainably, and it has to be done in a way that you can financially afford. Because if it's always the house is on fire and it's burning down, and we need to fix it as fast as humanly possible, a lot of the companies that you see that are going into CCAA right now, they've made the mistake of trying to jump in and increase their fertigation while increasing their people, while getting it all done in a ridiculously short period of time, and they run out of money because they just didn't have a plan. So it's one of the reasons that I'm excited about this webinar, is to talk about the strategy and the planning behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's got to be a well-defined plan before you can even think about scaling your cannabis op. This actual scaling effort needs to be written down, well thought out, and supported, in a variety of ways, whether that's financially, through people. There's a lot of, strategic planning that goes into scaling a cannabis op. Tom, why don't you just elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what does scaling cannabis operations mean to you? How would you kind of define the scaling of a cannabis op?
Yeah, I mean, I love Sarah's answer. I'll maybe touch on it from the other lens where like we go through a lot of situations with micros trying to go from cultivation into processing and ultimately get to market. And it's a process and, being organized without a doubt, knowing your numbers. And anyone who's in cannabis knows there isn't a lot of margin and really, really being precise, especially when it comes to like the labors, materials, and knowing ultimately, what we're landing on market at as far as MSRPs, and trying to find that formula. And allowing time is another one that I always run into, where everyone wants this tomorrow, and nothing works like that, especially in cannabis. And I'll relate to like the board members and all that. Just being a cannabis guy is the joke I have, is like, this takes time to grow this plant, so finding that balance, right? And the data, and then sticking to it without a doubt. You just got to have patience. So I'll leave it there.
Cool. Alex, I'm sure you've got something to add here, because something you mentioned during your intro that really resonated with me was running a profitable cannabis business. Because I think a common pitfall in this industry is people think that with greater scale comes greater profitability. And so a lot of either newly licensed operators or operators that have experienced a bit of success tend to think, hey, if we just 10x our footprint, what would that do to profits, right? We're gonna grow in such a crazy way, but oftentimes it's not this linear line of growth. There's bumps in that road, and it takes time. So, Alex, how would you kind of elaborate on that in terms of what does scaling a cannabis operation mean to you? I know you've had experience in a lot of different ops, so please chime in and hit us with your thoughts there.
Yeah, so we actually just scaled up. So we actually just doubled capacity, double output, and so on. There's one motto that I would say is gonna overshadow everything in this panel. It's taking the time to crawl, walk, and then run. You don't run before you crawl, you don't, and so on. So taking the times to do things proper. For me, there's really three ways of scaling up. So first off is growing your offering to meet the demand. You never grow cannabis that is not sold yet, right? Like you don't grow hoping you're gonna sell. You start growing up when there's the demand and you're gonna go meet that demand. So again, crawl, walk, run. Another way to scale up would be to basically find a way to have zero inventory write-off. So everything that's residue, whether it's plant matter, it's your trim, it's so on, converting it to hash, doing pre-roll, whatever, but getting to zero inventory write-off. And last but not least, true vertical integration. So when I'm talking vertical integration, it's none of that garbage of just being able to produce your own clones or being able to package in-house. That's a given. If you can't even do that, you're probably not in the right industry. When we're talking real vertical integration, it's like owning a cardboard company, because there's a lot of cardboard boxes going around, owning a Mylar pouch company, and so on. So that would be how we see scaling up, but it's always taking the time to crawl, walk, run, and never putting the bear before you actually killed it. And yeah, taking the time to really do it proper, and never go blindly in and just put mass production footprint of production, hoping it's going to go well.
Yeah, I dig that. Again, like in your intro, you mentioned one of the few profitable cannabis companies, which rings a bell for me. I've seen so many operations that do try to run before they're walking, and think that just building out the biggest facility or having the best equipment is then going to translate into good products or happy employees. And there's just so much that goes into running an operation day to day and producing profitable products. So yeah, I want to circle back around. Now we can kind of start to jump into some of the strategy of it, because we've talked about various ways we go about scaling. Sarah, what would you say are some of the like key considerations for a cannabis operation looking to scale? They're already licensed, they're producing a product, but what are some of the key considerations that they would put together for a plan to say, we want to grow our offerings in some way?
Sure. So first, I want to just jump back a minute, if that's okay.
Sure.
I love what Alex just said about the meaning of vertical integration. My background was in the franchise world, and in the franchise world, you own a piece of every single part. So if you are telling people these are the type of napkins that you need to use to have a franchise with us, you own a piece of that. right? You own a piece of the manufacturing companies, you own a piece of the logistics companies. It's not a whole ownership, but it's tiny little pieces, and that sort of like diversity and that diversity of offerings and kind of like splitting it up. That truly is vertical integration. Not very many people get that, so that's amazing. No wonder you guys are profitable. All right, so now I'll jump back to the question. So key considerations. So a lot of it is like Alex said as well. It's the running before you walk, right? It's really coming up with it's not necessarily practical to say that you have the traditional 3-year and 5-year business plan in this industry. We're moving too fast. The innovation is too much. The competition landscape, it changes so drastically that it's hard to create a set and fast rule the way that you would with other businesses. But you do need to have some sort of a plan. So if the plan is to increase your yield, for example, you've got to look at the environment that you're growing in. You've got to look at your actual facility. The amount of facilities that I've seen with failed crops, because they will get their market data will say that a particular strain is going to be popular in the next quarter. And everybody rushes to grow that one thing. And they don't actually look to say, can my facility actually grow this? Is this the right environment for this particular plant? Does this strain make sense for me to be involved in? Right. So that's kind of like step number one. It's really having that practical, that detailed, is what I'm trying to do, does that make sense? And then how do I do it? If I'm increasing my yield, am I increasing my fertigation? Does that mean that I need more people? Or do I need better operational efficiencies so that I actually have less people? I've seen organizations in the last couple of years that have scaled times 6, and they thought that scaling their cultivation times 6 meant that they needed 6 times the amount of people in the room. And it worked out that they actually needed 2 growers in a room of 3,000 plants instead of the old model where they had 20 growers in a room with 500 plants, right? So it's really working out those kinks. And unfortunately, the people aspect of it always seems to get left to the end. People, they concentrate, they're looking at the money, they're concentrating on what do I need to get to be profitable? I need more plants. How do I get more plants? More plants need to go in the room. Then I need more people, but they don't train people how to do it properly. They don't communicate out the plan. And they just don't have a strategy around it. So I could keep on talking, but I'll shut up here.
No, I mean, you touched on some great things there, and so much comes to mind in terms of like, okay, I'm gonna pull this lever, right? Or I'm gonna increase my plant count. What is the downstream effect of that decision? And a lot of times when operators or owners or people involved in a cannabis project are looking at the financials, right? They kind of just think that increasing plant count by X amount is going to increase revenue and profits by an equal amount. But like I'm super passionate about archery, and a common saying in archery is you change one thing, you change everything, because there's just so much that goes into like a complex bow and arrow system. And I think a sophisticated or even just a basic cultivation operation or cannabis operation is very similar, where if you change your plant count in a room that's been performing under a set of circumstances, now you just changed a variable that could change so many other things, right? It will change your nutrient usage. Now you're introducing X amount more volume of water every day into that environment to feed those plants. What does that do to environmental conditions? So there's a lot of considerations that an operation should be considering when trying to scale their op and go from 200 plants per room to 500 plants per room. It's not just an A plus B equals C. I think you touched on some of that. And Alex, I saw you kind of shaking your head and smiling as some of what Sarah was saying there. So you mentioned that origin. Tom, I'm not leaving you out. I can't wait to get to some of the like successes and failures you've seen firsthand in scaling the op. But Alex, please jump in here. You mentioned origin just 2x'd your production.
Yeah.
What were some of the key considerations that your team talked about when looking to grow your operation in that way?
Well, when we're looking at scaling up, so I think Sarah did a very fine example when we're talking about plant count, right? Like in one of my room, you can put 10,000 plants or 256. I'm probably going to get the same yield. The plant count doesn't mean anything, right? So when you're scaling up, for us, it's about right people in the right spot, as well as delegate to elevate, right? So when you have someone that thinks that by adding 500 plants in a room of 200, they're going to grow the yield, they're not the right person in the right spot. You clearly don't understand cannabis. So you need the people like Sarah, like Tom, that actually understand the cannabis industry to be in the right position to make choices that are going to translate down the line. Because if you're getting what we call, with a lot of love, suits that are just looking at Excel sheets to try to direct a business, because for them it's just another CPG, and they don't even understand what a dry flower is and what makes a good or bad dry flower, well, yes, you're going directly into a wall because you don't even understand the business you're in. So that's where getting the right person and then delegating to elevate comes into play. Because a lot of those suits or leadership aren't exactly good leader. We have 5 types of leader. There's a lot of level 4 leader. The best way for me to express it is if someone goes on vacation and shit hits the fan, they're not a good leader. You shouldn't want things to go bad when you're not there. You didn't do your job proper. Everything's supposed to go perfectly because you delegated correctly, and then you can move on to better pieces, right? And that's how you scale. You train your team to do what you've already mastered so you can move on, and you ensure that all the right people are in the right spot. And so you do a proper scaling. You don't start hiring 6 times the amount of growers because you have 6 times the square footage, because that's what you saw on a sales sheet. And you don't start making bad decisions based on a sales analyst that doesn't even understand the cannabis industry. If someone never consumed cannabis or never had to liquidate on the legacy market, they probably shouldn't be a sales analyst because all you're seeing is numbers to try to identify trends. Whereas other people that have legacy experience are going to see holes in the market that are not being filled. You need to remember cannabis is the most widely accepted experience and spread in legal culture in the world since the 1970s. Consumers know what they want. They're not waiting for some suit in some company worth billions of dollars to tell them. They already know. So you got to respect your consumers, grow with the right people, trust your team, delegate to elevate to then be able to scale up properly.
Dig it, man. You're using so much terminology that I'm familiar with from EOS. I don't know if Origin is
We run EOS. Do you guys do
EOS.
EOS? Did
Accountability
you
is
guys
my
do
love language, my man. Right person, right seat. When
We
you
do
talk,
L10s every week, man.
love it. I love it. No, when you talk about right person, right seat, and you're talking about key considerations, something we've kind of hit on here already, we can boil it all down to is like key considerations is have people on your team that understand cannabis before you start making moves in the wrong direction based on, like you said, a suit's opinion or a suit's decision to say the market is buying a bunch of Blue Dream. Well, let's double down on Blue Dream and we're going to grow a bunch of rooms of that next year. It's like, no, you're behind the wave a bit. So yeah, no, key consideration for me, or I think in any cannabis operation, is have people on your team who know this industry, who know the consumers and can make decisions from that experience. Tom, dying to get your take on some of this stuff. What are some of the successes and failures you've seen from operators who, took in some of these key considerations, right? They thought about crawling or walking before they were running. How have you seen people consider the right things, start to scale their business in the right way? And then what have been some of the mistakes you've seen in that same arena?
Yeah. I I call it like finding a plateau. And I'll explain this is like scaling up isn't just like let's get to the top of the mountain. It's like you got to take it in chunks and you got to plateau and you got to assess. And like what I mean by that is like Alex kind of nailed this where
like you need to be extremely organized. You need to have a game plan. And what happens a lot of the time is people keep climbing, and they're not really paying attention. And so what I say when I scale up, it's like right before I start to get bored is when we take another jump. Because when you hit that plateau, you know your SOPs are working, you know your staff understand it, everyone is playing the game together, and it's very, very consistent as far as a pattern goes. And once you get there, it's like, okay, what's next? And we go again. Because if you keep trying to go the whole way up all in one go, people burn out, shit gets sloppy. And one of the biggest things I've seen with scaling up as a mistake is quality is always the thing that gets jeopardized. And like I have this rule that good cannabis will sell and shitty cannabis is really hard to sell. And we're not doing the consumer any good, nor our staff, nor the company. So it's one of those things where it's, you know, like this, like this, like this. Um, I hope that makes sense. It's a kind of a silly metaphor, but yeah, that's. I think I'll leave it there if that's good enough for you.
Yeah. I like what you said about when you're starting to feel a little bit bored or feel like you got some idle hands, like now's the time to scale, take on a new project. When I think about scaling too, it doesn't always for me mean increasing output or increasing headcount. Like you might be scaling your business revenue by simply diversifying the portfolio of products that you're offering. Right now we're going from selling bulk bags or only one prepackaged flower SKU to multiple flower SKUs, and we're growing our business in a way that doesn't require this huge increase in footprint or additional headcount, right? We're just kind of working with what we got. But when you hit that point of, hey, we've been successfully executing our SOPs, right? Our employees are happy. We know our machine is working. It's well oiled. We're
Yeah.
doing the same thing day in, day out, and things are running well. Now, how can we kind of grow within, the confines of our current operation? Well, we might be able to grow the amount of products that we're offering. So yeah, I like what you said about kind of sticking to what you know, proving your current processes before trying to scale everything at once. Like let's get steady state before we then think about making this next jump. But then you make that jump, you grow a little bit, you reach steady state again, and now you have room to grow in another way.
100%. I think it's important to reflect and make sure it worked before you keep going.
Well, I'll just throw this question kind of out there to the whole panel. Tom, you mentioned quality being one of the first things to kind of slip when operators look to scale. What what would any of you say are some of the other like main obstacles that hold people back from successfully scaling outside of quality? Or maybe elaborate more on how you've seen quality be something that holds people back from successfully scaling.
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So, I mean, a lot of the time, just to kind of build off of what Tom had said, a very large mistake. Oh, sorry, got a frog in my throat all of a sudden. A very large mistake that we see is people making these big decisions to scale and they don't engage the team on the ground. You've hired people for their expertise, you've brought them in to help you build your business, and then you try to dictate to them and you don't actually listen to them when they come forward with ideas. Any major change, like that's the first rule of change management, whether it's a small change, whether it's a large change, engaging the team that you have on the ground and making sure that everybody has a buy-in. And then you have an entire team of people that's working towards a set and combined goal rather than just one person at the top. I like to use the Nike. I've said it quite a few times in conference calls. We don't work for Nike. We're not going to just do it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to strategize about it. We're going to bring in the people who actually know what it is that we're talking about, because we hired them we hired a master grower to tell us what to grow and how to grow it. Like let's engage the growers on the ground. Let's engage the team. And then we can sit down and we can work on a plan together. With the quality side, I kind of started there because on the quality side, a lot of the time the quality will slip because you're trying to do things too quickly and you don't have the engagement of the people on the ground. People get disenchanted. They get sloppy. These are plants. They're very, very reactive to the personalities, and to the. We talked about this a little bit in our like preempts. You know, happy people equal happy plants, and when you have happy, engaged employees or team members, I like to call them, those are the people who are working towards making sure that the product that leaves that is the best possible thing. There's a pride in it that you just don't get in another industry, maybe agriculture, but you don't get it in like manufacturing, right? So yeah, I'll kind of like leave it there and let somebody else jump in on that.
Yeah, I want to kick it over to Alex because I know he was ready to chime in there, but just kind of want to echo that sentiment from you, Sarah. I grew up in team sports, in cannabis. The team has always been such a big focus of mine because, you know, I've always said too, like any worthwhile project takes people. You know, you can do work by yourself, but at a certain point, if you're taking on big projects, big work in life, meaningful work, you're going to need support from people around you. And if you look at these, if you look at people as employees or numbers on a spreadsheet or payroll as a line item, you get very disconnected from the people aspect of running an operation. And I love that about you, Sarah, how these projects that you work on, you really take this people first focus. And I've seen what that can do too when an organization really embraces that and does engage the team and create that buy-in when everybody really is um, connected and can see that common goal and can see how their role plays a pivotal part in achieving that goal. um, People show up to work happy, and happy people grow happy plants, and that shows up in the weed at the end of
And they show up to work.
they show up to work. So yeah, I could not agree more that and a key consideration for scaling any kind of for scaling anything in cannabis should entail people, and probably if not at the top of the list, it's very high up on the list. So I want to kick it over to Alex. I know you're eager to jump in there. So um,
Well, it's going to be very similar, right? Like I like saying a lot that the only competitive advantage we have over all the other cannabis companies is our teamwork, nothing else, right? So when you're scaling up, some of the issues that I saw are consultants. A lot of consultants improvise themselves with legality. There's so many terrible ones out there, and somehow what happened is, again, when we're talking cannabis, a lot of people that are actually very good in cannabis didn't go to school. I didn't go to school. I didn't go to university, right? But now I work in multiple university. So we have a demeanor about us. We have a way to express ourselves that sometimes don't necessarily correlate with suits again. And so everything gets lost in translation. A good master grower doesn't want to talk to you, Austin. He wants to be in his plants and he wants to be left alone. They're not social. They don't want to interact. So good growers, good people that understand the market often don't have those tools that come from traditional education. And a lot of people that came up with the millions have a traditional education and don't respect what those people bring to the table. So somehow they're going to go see a consultant that have no idea what he's doing, but he's dressed in a suit and he has a little bit of charisma. So they're going to listen to him instead of trusting their own team, right? The other thing that comes back on what Sarah said is we hire someone for their competence, we fire them for who they are. There's a lot of people that who they are does not work in the industry. So it's getting the right people in the right spot and trusting them to grow. If you don't trust your team, you're not going to grow the right way. You're going to grow beyond demand. You're going to grow beyond offering. You're going to try to do everything at the same time. Oh, we're growing flower. We can do pre rolls also. Oh, we can do hash also. No, do one thing at a time correctly. Take the right people and stabilize that say right. Like like Tom said, you don't run up a hill. We are going upstairs. Very important. So people are the key thing. We're in a new industry. Nobody can say they're an expert. Nobody can claim to know what's going to happen next year. What's happening in California is not reality. That's not what the cannabis industry worldwide is going to be or is at all. So you can't even base yourself on that thinking that it's going to work. It's all really every province, every country is going to have their own consumption habit. What works in Quebec doesn't work in BC. So trust your people, hire the right people, and make the gap between the fact that, hey, university is not what it used to be. We're not in the 90s. Most people that actually have working experience are far better qualified than people that spent 7 years doing a PhD on plant science or agronomy.
And I hope if there's one takeaway from this webinar, it's that operators and folks running cannabis businesses should care about their people, listen to people, right? People should be at the top of the list with almost everything you do in business. I love that line too about the competitive advantage being your team, because a business plan is nothing without execution behind it. So yeah, people, people, people. Love it. Tom, love to kind of pivot this conversation a little bit, but just keep going along the lines of how do we scale? I know you've had your hands in operations that have successfully scaled from just micro cultivation, right, to micro cultivation and processing, or your work at the nursery there. Talk to us a little bit about the actual tools you're using to help these people grow. Um, is it production planning spreadsheets? Is it um, budget focus? Is it org charts where you are really defining people's roles and responsibilities? Is it SOPs and leaning on subject matter experts to really ramp up the kind of like knowledge that you're training employees on? Maybe talk to us about some of the tools you've used in helping scale operations.
Okay. Most important tool is a whiteboard and a dry erase pen. All problems can be solved with these two items. um, it it's a combination, right? Like budget, without a doubt, realistic timelines, without a doubt, and most importantly is like isolating projects to individuals who can execute that project. And what I've seen go sideways is you have one person doing 10 different things, and in my experience it hasn't been that effective, because you need to focus and put your energy into a task and make sure that thing is accomplished 110%, especially with scaling up, because you don't get too many kicks at the can to scale up. This costs a lot of money if you screw up, and we don't want that. So, as far as the spreadsheets, the budgets, realistic timelines, the whiteboard, and communication is so important between these projects that are all taking place simultaneously between different people. Every like 2 or 3 days, we're all getting together and assessing where are we at, what worked, what didn't, what changed, because nothing ever goes in a straight line. So I will put communication above all between the team when we're trying to get from here to there, and making sure we're all working towards that common goal, which Sarah said like perfectly. Yeah, that's very generalized, but like bullet points.
Okay. How would you communicate that plan to your team? Like, I'm sure there's brainstorming sessions, right? We get together, we're whiteboarding it out, but then how do you take those ideas, put them on a plan, and then effectively communicate that to the organization? Is that
Yeah, that's a fair question. So the train still needs to keep moving when it comes to daily operations, and again, quality needs to stay. So typically, we'll sit down and we'll allocate out time blocks. Like if it's already an existing operating facility, we'll say where do we have these time blocks, and we'll say, okay, this person, you have 3 hours this week, here, here, and here. Here's our task this week, and we kind of do like an opening meeting at the beginning of the week, saying this is what we want to accomplish, and then obviously one towards the end of the week to say like, hey, where did we end up with this? But that's just time management more than anything. And I will say that's sometimes a challenge within cannabis because things change all the time. But to be able to like throw those walls up, throw those blinders up, and say, listen, this hour is for me and this project. Because all it takes is one email or one phone call, and of course that project gets pushed aside. And you gotta keep momentum with like scaling up. You have to. So yeah, yeah, probably go forever, but I hope that like is a decent enough answer for you.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a lot of like kind of open forum communication throughout the organization, and then also just once you've clearly defined how that plan is going to be put into place, then assigning those tasks or assigning those responsibilities to individuals, being very clear about what they're responsible for, and then just kind of letting them go.
Yeah, and again, Sarah nailed this where like the whole team needs to be engaged. So how I do it is like I want them to tell me what that timeline is and what that project is. I want them to set their own target. I don't want to come in as like a dictator and say, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, because there isn't that engagement. We need them to, we need our whole team to want this win, right? So maybe that's more of like a psychology thing, but I find it very effective. And then people feel like they're equally contributing. They feel the value. They feel they're really a part of like this project. And when we hit it, everyone celebrates in that. It wasn't like I gave you a job to do. They're like, holy shit, we did this together. Time for beers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mm.
Um, Alex, I want to kick it over to you. I'd love to hear, when the rubber meets the road and Origin has put together a plan for scaling your op. What are outside of EOS, which I am again beyond thrilled to hear about, or maybe within EOS, what have been some of the tools that your team has used to successfully scale?
Well, I mean, EOS, and I'm happy you know about EOS. EOS is one of the main things that made us work. So EOS is basically a way to run the company where we listen to the people. So information comes from the bottom up and not up to the bottom. So the experts are the one doing it. Everybody has what we call a level 10 every week. Everybody is invited to be open and honest. So I can be called out by whoever. I can call out the CEO. So we make people accountable. So just like Tom said, you want to make people involved because we move like a family. So the right way also to scale up is, it's a concept from EOS, is defining who you are, right? So we at Origin have four core value: family, passion, street smart, and social consciousness. We hire, promote, reward, do business based on those four core values. So Nike, again, is a company that I love. When you go into the Nike headquarters, you step into the hall, there's like pictures of athletes, and their motto is crush the competition. You go into the Nike headquarters and you know right away if you belong in that company. So people will auto disqualify themselves, not because they're bad people, just because they didn't have the same core value, and that's fine. But that's how you assemble a team of like-minded individuals that will live truly those core values and bring the project to the next step. So when we're sitting down, it's really everybody is an expert on their own domain. We trust, we analyze how we're going to scale up, and then we put into activity. All comes down to the people again.
I know people probably joined in this webinar thinking we were going to talk grams per square foot or fertigation systems, right? How do we scale cultivation? And it's been a lot of conceptual conversation around how do we align people towards this
Well,
plan.
exactly. You can't grow if you have silos within your industry. I mean, within your company, silos are no matter what industry we're talking about, whether we're talking scaling up peanut butter or cookie making or cannabis. If you have silos, people not talking to one another, you're going to make bad decisions that are going to cost money. So it all comes down to know your shit, own it, don't wait for tomorrow, do it now, and trust the people you're with. It's as simple as that. There's no secret to it, but to do it correctly and do it with people who care about it.
Yeah.
And while we're on this, if I can jump in as well, I just want to kind of build off of that first of all, when we're talking about communication, it's not just communicating out what the CEO or the board's plan is to the people on the ground so that they can execute it, right? It's also communicating the why. We have, as Alex had said, and as Tom had mentioned in some of our earlier things, this is a very special industry with where our subject matter experts are people who basically like to stay in a room and not talk to anybody. And they don't understand the why, especially for the legacy operators, they don't understand why we have to scale the way that we have to scale, the criteria and stuff around it, and why sometimes their experience and their expert opinion can't actually work in the scaling process. And the more that you engage them, the more that you, okay, well, I understand this is how you could do it in a normal setting, or this is how you've done it in your past life. Here are the boundaries, here are the criteria that we have to meet here. Let's walk through it together. Like how can we do this in a way that we're really bringing your expert opinion to the forum, but we have to meet regs. We have to meet regs. We can't fight pest diseases with orange juice, for example. That's a real one that we saw last year. The amount of fights that went on, like, no, orange juice is going to get rid of this problem. It's like, yes, it will, but we can't do it, right? And but it's explaining the why. It's that communication and transparency. I am beyond tired of hearing the word transparency in core values, in town halls, and not actually having any transparency or honesty at all. Like, be honest. Be honest with your team. It's harder for public companies. Not everything can be shared. Like, I get it, but as much as you possibly can, be honest with your team. What are you trying to accomplish? Why does it need to be done that specific way? Why do you need to be done in that time frame? And if the answer is, if we don't do this in 3 months, the doors are going to close and you guys are all going to be out of a job. I would love to be on a town hall where somebody actually says those words instead of lying about it. Right? It's I've closed too many doors where everybody was like, hold on, I thought we were doing well. Like, I thought that things were finally together. Everything was working really well. The team is amazing. The fertigation system is up. We've scaled efficiently. We have the best people in the best place and an amazing culture. What do you mean our doors are closing? Nobody understands it if the transparency and the communication isn't there. So I'll kind of like add that on to the communication piece as well. Honest communication.
Yeah, it all resonates with me so much. And yeah, like something Alex mentioned was like right person, right seat. There's a lot of ways to phrase that, but I've found that in organizations, when you do have the right people in the right seats, you oftentimes might not even have to get into the how a whole lot, right? If you just tell them the why and they're bought into that reason and they're the right person, they'll figure out the how to get there, but they have to believe in the why to make the effort to actually do it. Um, but yeah, communicating the why behind your decision making is so huge. Um, People will become very disconnected from the operation if they don't believe in the why. It doesn't matter if your scaling plan makes sense on paper. If your people don't believe in the execution of that plan, you're never going to get there. Man, I feel like we could go on all day about this. I love talking about how to grow an operation, how to improve the team. Everybody here has contributed so much today, and want to start to kind of conclude this webinar, but also want to leave kind of an open forum here for anything that we didn't touch on yet. Is there anything that's top of mind for any of our panelists today that you think really relates to scaling a cannabis operation that we didn't get to yet in the conversation, or any concluding thoughts, I guess, in general too?
Sure. If ever, so the cannabis industry is gigantic. Right now, the whole world is looking at us. We are going to be the expert, not the United States. It's going to be Canada. We're developing an expertise. The system that we legalized in is also the one that's going to be taking as an example. So we have an opportunity to be world leaders in cannabis. There's enough cake for everybody. Go ask questions, go meet people, go see the ACIC in Quebec, the Association Québécoise d'Industrie du Cannabis. We love to share knowledge. We love to make new friends. We love to help out everyone. You're not in this alone. The second that the big suits are all gone, it's going to be a beautiful industry with a lot of friendship and a lot of help in between each other. So keep strong, find the right partners, which could be Elevated Signal, could be Damatex, whichever, but find the right people to work with to make your dream become a reality. And don't be shy to ask questions. Don't get stuck to, I paid a consultant, so this is his answer, this is the holy truth. No, go do your own homework.
I dig that, Alex. And I think I can totally agree that when the industry kind of settles out, it'll be people who have a passion for this plant kind of first and foremost that continue to not just survive but thrive in this industry. If you're solely motivated by profits or kind of the green rush that the cannabis industry has brought to the world, probably won't be in it for the long haul. But you see so many people in this industry with a student mentality, right? They want to share their knowledge with others. They're giving of their time and their energy and all the passion that goes into being a part of this industry. That's like it's really felt. Um, and yeah, so excited about the future for the industry, both in Canada, in the US, and internationally as well. But um, man, we barely scratched the surface on what legal cannabis means, and there's so much potential and opportunity for the future. So, Sarah, Tom, any concluding thoughts for us?
Why does Alex got to keep throwing shots at consultants?
I know he's got 2 consultants on the call. Damn, Alex.
Hey,
He's right though.
I wasn't targeting you guys. There's only good things going around, but you know who I'm talking about when I'm taking those shots. You guys are not targeted. I can say Sarah and Tom are great people.
I'm bugging. No, he nailed it, man. Ask for help. Ask for help. Remove your ego. There's an amazing community out there full of the real ones, and Austin and Elevated knows this. Like, we have so many conversations, and you guys have sent me to so many cool people that have had answers and have done things that we were trying to do. So that's it, man. Like, I'm just gonna echo what Alex said. He was spot on.
And I guess from my point, I mean, one of the things that I would just say is like actually have a realistic plan that you are anybody who's opened one of these companies, they are in the business to make a profit at the end of the day, right? Like you have to have a profitable company. Otherwise you can't pay your team, you can't grow the plants, you can't do any of the things. It needs to be profitable at the end of the day, but be realistic about what profitability means. An average company is not profitable for the first 5 years. So the expectation here that people seem to have that they open up a retail store or they open up a grow facility or a processing lab and they're going to be make profitable at the end of year 2, it's ridiculous. It's just, I would love to just completely remove that. If you are, then fantastic, shout it from the hilltops, but plan for 5 years. Plan that you're not going to have anything else in the next 5 years. What do you need to do to be able to start? What do you need to do to be able to scale? Take it back to business and finance 101. What are your profits? What are your overheads? How can you achieve those? And then build a strategic plan around it so that you can get there within the next 5 years. It's a marathon. It's not a race.
Yeah. Yep, I dig it. It's not a race to profitability, although if you achieve profitability in a quicker timeline than you plan for, like Alex is smiling, right? It sounds like Origin has found some great success. That's awesome, but it takes so many of the right things, right? Right people, right facility, right market, right? Good decisions of what you're growing, why you're producing what you produce. And I guess not to get long-winded here, but something that Alex said early on that really resonates with me is don't try to scale without demand. If you're just growing to grow, or growing for growth's sake, you're likely going to end up on the wrong side of that profitability equation. But when you take the right steps, you surround yourself with the right people, and you take these challenges one at a time versus trying to take on the whole cannabis industry at once. It's pretty incredible what can be done over the course of 12 months, 24 months, 3 years. And we tend to be a little bit, we work in shorter timelines in cannabis than traditional business. Like Sarah mentioned, this industry seems to move at the speed of light. So yeah, it's really exciting to see some of the successes that operators have already experienced, that opportunity that exists out there in the future for current operators to grow or folks to enter this business. And there's a lot of ways to go about scaling. So we've touched on a few of them today. It's been an awesome conversation. So just want to say thank you to each of you for taking the time today to join us. And then as part of outros too, like maybe share with us contact info. How do folks in the audience or people who tune into this webinar in the future, how do they follow your work or get a hold of you and ask questions? Like we said, how do they kind of engage with your community?
So LinkedIn, definitely the place to be. LinkedIn is the only cannabis-friendly social media. Also, it's to reach professional. I mean, Instagram and Facebook, not the best one to reach out people. I'm very big on LinkedIn. I do a lot of video. When we were talking about transparency, I put out the whole facility and the whole process on video on LinkedIn. A lot of university contacted me using my videos to show their students. We're always happy to answer questions. We invite every single cannabis company to the AKIC also to come with us. You can follow me. I'm on multiple conferences, and we're always happy to make new friends. So reach out. It will be our pleasure.
Thanks for that, Alex. Tom, Sarah, any way you'd like to kind of share contact info or ways for the community to engage with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place for me as well. I'm also really active on Twitter. It's at SarahSeal18, and my email address is sarah@sseal.com. So pretty easy. I'm fairly responsive, so it's quite easy. And the thing about it is, if you have questions and I don't know the answer, that the chances are the network is amazing. I know somebody who does, that I can kind of refer it over.
Good. Thanks.
Yeah, for me, website's great, growboxconsulting.com. LinkedIn, I think our Instagram is growbox.cannabis. I'm still trying to figure out how to use Instagram, if I'm being honest. We're here to chat. Anyone who wants to hop on a call, without a doubt, that's what we're here for.
I love it. Love it. Good vibes from the crew here. And again, like the community here is full of good people. So don't hesitate to ask questions. No ego forward people here. We're all here to win and support each other. So yeah, Tom, Sarah, Alex, thank you all again for taking the time to join us today and chat about scaling cannabis hops. I think it's been a good conversation, and I hope we get to do it again sometime here in the future.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Yeah, thank you, Elevated, for putting this on and being the only real system that answers to our demand, builds a workflow to our workflow. It doesn't ask us to adapt to their workflow instead. So thank you, Elevated. You made my life so much easier in the past, and I'm very happy we went with you guys.
Love to hear that. Love to hear that. All right, guys. Well, thanks again. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and can't wait to chat with you again soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.